Hi, and welcome to the Answers podcast, where we want you to leave every episode excited. My name's Laura Mai, and I'm a traveling marketing consultant looking to make ethical marketing easy. Today, I'm excited because on the podcast, we have one of my favorite authors. He's a best-selling author, and he's a behavioral economist, Dan Ariely. Dan and I met in a really unconventional way. I actually went viral on TikTok for playing back one of his studies verbatim from his book, Predictably Irrational. The video blew up. It was quite controversial. It's a controversial study. But because of that, I reached out to Dan and we ended up having a conversation back and forth on email, and he kindly agreed to come onto this podcast for you today. So we're going to be talking about misbelief in this episode, why people have these incorrect assumptions, why good people have incorrect assumptions. And Dan is so insightful and so wise, and I know that you're going to get something really good out of this episode. I know I did. He asked a lot of hard questions, and you're going to go away overthinking for the next 48 hours in the best way. I mean, at least I did. So without further ado, let's get into it.
There's no need to complicate things. Let's stick to the basics.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into the podcast today. We have Dan Ariely, who has just written an amazing book on misbelief and kind of the perceptions that we have around one another due to our own biases. And I feel like, Dan, you can explain it a lot better than me. I just finished your book and I sent you an email about it because it opened my eyes. So why don't you get into what misbelief is about in your words? And also, if you could do an introduction on yourself as well, that would be amazing.
Sure. So my name is Dan Ariely. I'm a professor of psychology and behavioral economics. And basically, I try to figure out what are the things that we don't do so well and that we should do better. And all the rest of my books came out of my research. I would do research and then I try to explain what I think I found. This book was very different. It started with attacks on me that were concerning the COVID-19. I'll just describe one video. There was one video that described how because I was badly injured, which is true, and because I was for 3 years in hospital, also true, I started hating healthy people. Not true. And that's why I joined the cabal, Bill Gates and the Illuminati to try and kill as many people as possible. Also not true. And I spent about a month trying to argue with these people and say, look, it's not true. Here's evidence. Here's what I've done and so on. And I failed miserably. And after a month of failing miserably, I realized that misbelief is a big deal. It's one thing to say, some people believe the earth is flat. Some people believe this. But when you stand in front of somebody and they tell you something about you, like I would say, Laura, yesterday you were so rude to your mother. And you said, no, I didn't even talk to my mother. I said, no, and the moment you realize that there are people who will tell you something about you that is just not true, it kind of opened my eyes to the importance of this. So I spent 2 years trying to understand misbelief, trying to understand how can it be that good, kind, smart, intelligent people get to believe things that are just so hard to grasp. And the end of the story is that, in the same way that the cookie is designed to attack us, salt, sugar, fat, kind of to attack our human weaknesses, misbelief is also designed to attack us, but in a much broader way. It attacks our emotional system and our cognitive system and our social system and our personality, to basically lead us down a wrong path. And the consequences are very dire for us individually, for our families and so on, but also for society as a whole.
For sure. And I think that we see that. So it's echoed throughout our political systems, our entertainment, and our algorithms, and how divided this misbelief has made us. Because in your book, you were talking about the term Nazi and fascist being used on everyday people. What do you think the effect of that kind of cancel culture is?
Very, very tough. It's very, very tough. Actually, the way we communicate online and the way we see other people communicating is giving licensing to things that we just shouldn't give licensing to, and it deteriorates us, right? So, for example, even the term Nazis, Nazi Germany was a horrific thing, but now everybody's using that term, right and left. No, it's not true. Give Second World War its due.
Right.
It's a unique. Thankfully, it's a unique event in human history. We shouldn't think of it in those ways, and we shouldn't do it. The other thing, though, is that the reason it is being used, the reason people are using pedophiles and Nazis and so on, is to basically make sure that we don't forgive those people. So, if you think about all kinds of things, terrible things that people do, there are some things that we forgive and some things we will not forgive. And the people who are enticing what we call moral outrage, they don't just try to hate, they try to have moral outrage. They say, these people are so terrible that no matter what they do, we'll never forgive them. So people use these terrible terms. And the final thing about this, so we said that the funnel of misbelief has stress, emotion, cognitive, personality, and social. The social part is an important part, and it kind of seals the deal. But one of the things in our search for having social acceptance is to be extreme. Why? Because imagine you convey opinions that are kind of run of the mill. You're like the average person. How many people are going to say, go for it, we're proud of you? No, to get those likes or social recognition, you need to go above the fold. You need to make something that is extreme and so on. And we've created a culture where people say lots of things that they don't really mean, but they're just used to convey their personality or their identity, right? So it goes all the way from somebody says Trump really won the elections to somebody saying there's no such thing as gender, to somebody saying that we can eradicate all of those people, or to saying all politicians are pedophiles, whatever it is. People are saying these extreme sentences in order to portray their ideology. But then, of course, there's no way for us to know. Imagine that you're saying something now that is so extreme that you don't believe it, but you try to say, look how liberal or how progressive or how conservative I am. It doesn't matter. I don't have a good way to find out if you really mean what you're saying, or you're just saying it as a signaling devices. And so much of what we see is just signaling. And that basically get the discussion to deteriorate over time.
Yeah, that you're so insightful. I wonder do you think that there's a lack of attention in our society, like where people feel like they're deeply seen? Where do you think this is coming from?
So the starting point of misbelief is actually stress. And I don't mean the stress of, my goodness, I'm so busy. I mean the stress of the world is not running in the way that I thought it would, and I'm not getting my share, and I'm not sure what it is. And I think that a lot of young people these days have lots of reason to be stressed. When Chat GPT came out, I had talked with lots of students on campus. I was surprised how many of them were fearful for the future. Like they said, what will I do? Here is this technology that would replace me. I think we have lots of young people who spend the last 2 years of their high school or the first 2 years of college during COVID. Again, very tough situation. The economic outlook is not clear. The war between Russia and Ukraine is certainly creating extra stress, and the war in Israel, and whether this will be a beginning of a third world war, is also stressful. So people, I think, are justifiably at a stressful time in their lives. And not only that, but the real remedy against stress, the best thing is to reduce stress. But if you can't reduce stress, the next best remedy is resilience. And resilience means that you have close friendship, and you have close family, and you have people you can rely on. And we're getting worse on that as well. As inequality increases, resilience goes down, even at the level of a neighborhood. And as inequality at the level of a neighborhood increases, people are less likely to ask other people for a favor, for an egg. So we are kind of at a high time in stress and low time in resilience. And I certainly understand people who are saying something is wrong here and feel out of sorts. And then that is a very easy starting point to look for a villain. Why this is happening, who is its fault? It can't possibly be me. My parents almost told me I was be good and I was expecting this future. Things are not working out. Who is at fault? So I think this is one big element. And then, of course, the second big element is the cognitive element. Mm-hmm. We can pick which news we want to see. We can see only things that justify our points. The arguments are not as complex. They are simple and emotional. Usually things are, TikTok length. And then, of course, we have social media more generally. And it's not just the media. It's about, if I don't like being exposed to opinions that are not like mine, I can find a place that has just opinions like mine. And I can find people who would support me, and they would support me even more if I express more crazy, extreme ideas. So the combination, again, think about the cookie metaphor, the combination attacks all of our element of our psychology and leading to something that eventually is very bad. So, for example, I look at the recent trend of TikTok where people read this letter from Osama bin Laden to the American people. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay, so there were lots of people who read this letter and were crying. They were crying with sorrow for the jihadists who committed the atrocities on the U.S. in 9/11.
Wow.
And I think those people are again stressed, and they don't know, and the complexity of the situation is very large, and there's lots of reading to do. And they read one thing, they get one perspective, their emotions get ignited, they express something on TikTok that echoes out, and they go down that letter. And in general, you would say that's not a good recipe in the world for the next generation of our leaders. So yes, when I started this book, in my mind, I had space for a chapter on solutions. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I didn't get to a chapter on solution. I got to lots of little sections called hopefully helpful, but no solution. And I think the solutions are going to be tough. In the same way that, the obesity epidemic is a big deal and we need to do lots of things. We need to change the food supply. We need to change the type of food that we eat, and we need to change supermarkets, and we need to change how we eat at home. And there's so many things. This is even worse. I think there's so many things that we need to change, but the first step for real change is awareness. We need to understand what we've done to ourselves, and then hopefully we can start acting toward changing it.
Yeah, I so admire you because you seem to live in this middle place that just isn't judgmental. It just is looking to understand, and that is such a beautiful thing.
So let me say something about this. I'm a social scientist, and I adopt social science as a way of living. And one of the things we find is that the environment has a big role to play. And I really believe that. So when we look at people acting badly, it's very tempting to say, okay, these are people that have not done well. Or you can say, what have we unintentionally created about the environment? Mm-hmm. So think about something simple like spending money. Lots of people are financially irresponsible. And you can say, oh, it's people. Or you could say, we give people 6 credit cards. What do we expect somebody to do if you give them 6 credit cards and send them to a mall with all these temptations? Now, I don't think the people who give them credit card have this intention necessarily, but I think that in total, the system is creating very undesirable effects. And, I think with misinformation and misbelief, I think that if we look 10 years ago, it's the big challenges of society. Misbelief would not have been one of them. But I think all kinds of things have happened, including the increased stress and decreased resilience and the prevalence of social media and the separation in society and identity politics that have basically created a system that is actually not in our favor, but it's a system. The people would have, like if we had a different system, the people could have been just wonderful, but we need to change the system.
It's so true, because when listening to you talk, you really got people down to the science, which totally makes sense. Because we're hardwired to want certain things. We're hardwired to gather. We're hardwired to be social. We're hardwired to survive, right? And in this capitalist environment, not that I'm saying capitalism is bad, because it certainly has its benefits to a point, there just is so much incentive to play on people's biggest weaknesses. I want to pull back really quick as well to something that you were talking about around good and bad, especially pulling into your book as well. In the last chapter, you talk about why Superman gives you hope, which I really hope that the people watching this do end up either reading or listening to your book, because you talk about how villains, for example, they give us that clear-cut line of, oh, we definitely, that's not me, and that's my moral line, and I'm above that kind of person, because we do think in terms of relativity. But how do we stop? I mean, you said that you haven't really been able to come up with solutions either. That I'm totally putting you on the spot. But how do we stop making either really good or really bad, all these extremes so appealing, and make the middle more appealing? Is there a way that can be done?
So there are lots of ways. Some of them are easier than others, but there's lots of ways. So, when we think about, again, this funnel of misbelief, we said stress, cognitive, personality, social. If we think about the cognitive part, that's probably the easiest part to tackle. And there's a question I really love, which is, what would it take to change your mind? So I'm not going to put you on the spot right now, but later on, when you have time, send me an email and tell me what is one thing that you have very strong beliefs in. Don't say it now. Just think about it, right? Tell me one thing that you truly believe in a kind of a big thing, not like I believe that, Colgate is better than something big. And then answer the question, what would it take to change your mind? And when we ask people this question, people basically usually get to the understanding that the knowledge is actually not that deep. Because you say, I don't think anything. So what does it mean? Is it really a well-articulated opinion or not? There's another version of it, which is a bit more complex, which is to ask people to explain their position in a better way. So let me give you an example. Usually when we try to convince people, we come at them. We try to argue. What would it take to change your mind? And the thing I'm going to talk about next, which is called the illusion of explanatory depth, saying we're not arguing with people, we're coming from their side. So imagine that you say to me, the solution for the increased wealth gap in the US is better education. And you're sure about that, right? And I say, okay, very good. How do you do it? Just saying better education is very simple. But what exactly do you mean? And give me more and more details. We have done this with people who claim that the US elections were stolen. And so, you think the election was stolen? how do elections actually work? Like what happens? How do votes get counted? How they get verified and so on? And where would exactly they would be stolen? Like how would it work out? And most people say, maybe I'm not so sure, because we have these ideas in a general way, but when you start thinking about it and breaking into components, we recognize that we don't know how the world works. We don't know how a zipper works, and we don't know how a lock works, and we don't understand viruses, and we don't understand how Pfizer got through the FDA, and the amount of things that we think we know and we don't really know is very large. So one mechanism on the cognitive side is to basically reduces people's confidence, because the moment you're not 100% confidence, you're only 90% confidence, we're basically becoming more tolerable people. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's this way. That's great, but we don't want the 100% confidence. And then the other thing we should do personally is think about resilience. What is our resilience? How much time do we spend with real friends? Again, I'm not putting you on the spot, but one favorite version of this I have is to ask people, how many friends do you have that at the moment's notice will fly 3,000 miles and pay $30,000 to bail you out of prison? Now, I hope you will never have to experience that. It's not about that, but it's about how many people do we have that are so close to us that we would feel comfortable calling them and say, don't ask question, just show up here with $30,000. And I think that all of us don't have enough of those. And we need to create them for ourselves. We need to create it for other people. And it's not easy. People travel. You're traveling right now. People traveling, we're not spending enough time in one place. We're all busy. Social media get us to feel that we're spending time with friends, even though we're not really. So I think building resilience for ourselves and for others is another part of it. And then on the social part, one of the things that is very dangerous is this information bubbles. And it used to be that the workplace was a place where we had to face other opinions. But now many workplaces say, don't talk about anything sensitive. That's not a good idea. We're spending more and more time with nuclear families. We have fewer and fewer friends. Work is a place to get exposed. Like media, we pick the media that we agree with, so we're not exposed to different opinions. Workplace is one of the only places that allow us to get exposed to different ideas in a place that we respect each other. We work together, but you believe something very different. That's great. So anyway, there are many other things, but you could see how there are things to do in each of those, even before we regulate social media and do all kinds of other things.
Yeah. So many great points you just made there, and so many questions that I'm going to go home and think about. In terms of, like, if there was one question above all of those questions that you would want everyone listening to think about tonight, what would that question be?
So I think we should, like, if you ask what would get us to be the best people that we can, right? What question would get people to be the best that we can? I think it would be, to what extent, what would help me live better with ambiguity? So what we want to do is we want not to jump to conclusion and to hold multiple hypotheses in mind, and to realize that there's no white and black and everybody is slightly wrong and everybody is slightly correct. And I would say that we need to basically ask ourselves, if we want to improve, and you ask me what's the question that we can ask ourselves about improving, I think it's about asking ourselves and trying to enjoy not knowing, to basically saying, here is something that is, it would be really easy to say, these are bad people, these are good people, or something like that. Democrats versus Republican, whatever, good versus bad. But can I accept that there's no right and wrong and everybody is slightly right and slightly wrong? And can I actually live well with this ambiguity? And the moment we live better with this ambiguity, everything becomes better, because it's not about I'm trying to prove you wrong and you're trying to prove me wrong. It's about trying to find out something together. It's about a search for better knowledge. It's not about my identity is tied up with this or my identity is tied up with that. So that, I think, is the issue. Can we, I mean, there's other things as well, but this one is, can we learn to enjoy the process of knowing that all opinions, or many opinions, I don't think the people who think the earth is flat are correct, but that there are some in every big debate in society, Democrats versus Republican, more taxes versus less taxes, gun control, no. In every debate, there are good reasons for and against, and we have to slowly figure out where we stand, but that every side has some right.
You were so interesting. I could literally listen to you talk all day, but we have run out of time. Thank you so much for jumping on this podcast with me. And I hope you have a great night.
You too. Thank you so much. Lovely to meet you. And don't forget your homework.
I won't. I'll send you an email. Cheers.
Let's stick to the basics.